Hey, good morning, everybody. Jim Benton here with Chorus for the daily briefing. I'm joined today by the CMO of Highspot, Jon Perera. Hey, Jon, how you doing today?
I'm terrific. How are you, Jim?
Good. Hey, it's great to have you. I've been following Highspot for many years. I've been following you, and just awesome to finally get some time together.
Yeah, I've enjoyed getting to meet you and the team. Fantastic. And always been really amazed at what you have done over your career and in particular Chorus. So kudos to you.
I appreciate it. Well, thanks. Well, we share a common joy for helping to enable teams and coach them. Before we jump in, I was curious about your background. It looks stunning. How is the new office?
Oh, yeah. So yeah, gotta love those Zoom virtual backgrounds. Welcome to the inside of Highspot's brand new Seattle offices. We put a lot of our corporate values up on the wall. One of them is around this notion of earning the next challenge. So if you win a big deal, that's great. You got to go earn the next big deal. Or if you earn a promotion or you earn, maybe it's more funding. And the idea is that you're always striving. Anyway, we've got it all up with the walls. It's got to be nice for the cleaning crew that comes by once a week.
I'm starting to feel ready or excited to be with my peers, my colleagues back in person again. What are you seeing up in Seattle?
Oh, we're the same. You know, we've got two teenagers running in the house, crawling the walls, the dog barking, interrupting mission critical board meetings or customer meetings. And I'm ready to go back to the office. And I think, you know, what we're seeing is like a lot of people were like, hey, I've been working remotely and from home forever. Join the party. This is how I work.
Yeah.
Really sellers that are out in the field. And so I think what'll happen is we're all going to come back and figure out there's a hybrid way of coming back, which is the best of what we're all learning, new skills, new muscles, as well as the in-person. So, but I'm looking forward to being back.
I think it's right. I know my kids are looking forward to being with their classmates back in school. I feel the same way about my colleagues. So I'm excited that we're hopefully getting closer to that. I'd love to get your perspective on the data today. The data this week has been fascinating, and specifically what we've been sharing is that there's a significant increase in managers taking coaching actions. And as Highspot's a leader in sales enablement, we're a leader in conversation intelligence. I'd love to get your perspective of, you know, what are we seeing from coaching? How are things changing out there today and going forward?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And this data is fascinating to me for a couple of reasons. Chief among them being probably for the last 6 or 12 months, we talked about this a little bit earlier, Highspot helps create this event called the Soiree. We've been doing it at Dreamforce for a couple of years. We get together a couple of thousand sales enablement professionals to talk about the state of the art. What does best practice look like? What is good? And I think at the most recent event in the fall, when we had an in-person event, remember those things, one of the top 3 topics across all the panels and everything we did literally was coaching. And, you know, how do we coach the coach to be a great coach? Because sometimes it's the top seller that got promoted into the manager job and they're great at selling by themselves,
Yeah.
but maybe they need a little bit of coaching on how to give great coaching. And so I think, particularly in the world of like B2B selling, there's been a pent up need and understanding in sales and marketing and enablement teams that your frontline manager is the tip of the spear. That's where change happens. That's where you impact the customer the most. And maybe it kind of took this horrible situation we're in to cause this spike in coaching and taking advantage of these incredible tools. So it's something we're seeing a lot across the board. And you know, another dimension of it too is like keeping sellers motivated. And what worked 6 months ago doesn't work today. And we're all kind of inventing.
Yeah. I think the precision of coaching is what's interesting. You know, from the walking the halls, feeling the energy, you know, getting a sense of what's working to now the precision of down to the minute, down to the specific attribute, story, question, and having managers get in on that and doing that at scale. That does excite me. I think that would move us forward as an industry.
And it's interesting, you know, we talk a lot about what does it mean to get a team ready?
John, I might have frozen you there for a second. Oh, there you are. Hey.
Sorry, thanks.
I wanted to get your perspective as well on what we're seeing on kind of the cold call dials, and really from your perspective on the marketing side. Love to get a sense of what's changed and how you're thinking about marketing and the role of marketing to build pipeline and demand, you know, over the next few months and going forward.
Yeah, for sure. You know, like on the one hand, with cold calling, people are at home more, so we've seen that they're more likely to take a call. But I think from a marketing perspective, we've realized and seen sort of three big pivots or shifts across the board, and what we're doing, what I'm seeing a lot of peers doing. I'd quickly sort of say, number one is this whole notion of empathy for the buyer.
Yeah.
Everybody's going through a really tough time. That could be a health situation, a company performance, some other caring for loved ones. And marketing and what we're doing on cold calling, the more that we focus on helping from a really authentic perspective, the more traction that we're making with customers, because it's the right thing to do. Number two is, this whole notion of community. We're all in this thing together. We'll all switch to Zoom, this, that, and the other thing. And maybe one insight is that, we're competing for digital attention. So even if you're making that cold call and you make the connection, they could be on Teams or Slack or email or interrupted, maybe in a way that they weren't before. And so you have to find a way to cut through and really making, I think, peer-to-peer advocacy being a key part of that. And then the last point, you're talking about just building demand for marketing, is you shift from in-person events to webcasts and digital. The customer experience is everything. I mean, down to the pixel on the screen. And you really have to think about, how do you make it great for that buyer to interact with you digitally?
I think I'm curious about when you think about people buying right now, when you think about the pipelines, and we're mid Q2, getting to end of Q2, but just more holistically, what are you hearing out there from customers? Are people still buying? What segments are sort of responding? What are you seeing?
Yeah, totally. We're crazy time, Q2, Q3. I don't think anybody really knows what to expect. You've seen sort of the articles that look at, here's Main Street, here's Wall Street, and there's a real divide taking place there. So what we're seeing is that, for our organizations that are using Highspot and even ourselves, like the deals are there, the pipeline is there, but it's choppy. SMB, it's either happening really fast or it's now taking 3 or 4 times longer.
Sure.
Big enterprise or big strategic deals, like big ones, people realizing we need sales enablement, or we need to move to this modern selling platform quickly. We don't have an option. So it's either happening fast or it's taking 3 or 4 times as long. And I think that makes it tougher, from a forecasting perspective.
Yeah.
I think that said, we're seeing some micro verticals take off that we never would have targeted in the past. We were talking earlier about, transportation and logistics. As everybody shifts to shipping by DHL and Amazon and FedEx and all these things, that's a micro vertical that's taken off in a really big way. Fintech, telehealth, these are all industries that companies may not have targeted as much in the past, but have huge upside and growth to them.
We were looking at this data yesterday, so I'll pull up just a quick snapshot. But when we looked at the segment data, because I think what you're getting at on the micro segments and choppy, some are rushing to move very quickly to fill gaps, and others are more cautious as they're looking at their own businesses. The data that we shared this week, fintech right there, up 10% since pre-COVID, and 11% week over week, and this seems to match what you're seeing out from yourself.
Yeah, and I think that also maps to some data that we're seeing internationally. So the UK, for example, fintech is probably one of the fastest growing categories over there as well. Anywhere you've got a concentration of disruptive a technology space that's disruptive to is ripe for high growth right now.
What about the CFOs? We're seeing a 91% increase, huge increase this week in terms of CFOs joining calls. How do we enable our teams for this? What do we need to be doing differently to make sure that we're effective in these interactions?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time with my CFO. I know a lot about how he thinks, and certainly we're seeing this across the board as well. A few thoughts. CFOs right now are thinking about a couple of things. How do we retain the base of customers and revenue that we have today? How do we still drive growth in the future so we can't just stand still and do nothing? How do we mitigate the downside risk? So control costs.
Yeah.
Any investment that we do, you better be able to prove to me that there's demonstrable ROI. And so part of it is, talking to our sellers around, hey, this is what's going on for a CFO right now. Walk a mile in their shoes. And they're going to be asking questions around, flexibility. So in the old world, maybe we would do a deal for a year or 2-year term, and these would be the deal terms. But CFO wants to see, much more deal flexibility because we don't know what that Q3 or Q4 is going to look like. And so if we can work with them and create that partnership, I think that's really good. Better come with really hard data about how it's going to either save money or give real ROI, full stop. And it's going to be, what we're seeing is that CFO ask more and more for, show me what other companies have done this that look just like me, because I want to see the data from where you've done this successfully before.
I saw that you had an ROI calculator on your website. We've heard a lot about just being more focused on extreme ROI right now. Are you seeing an uptick on that, or just how are you thinking about presenting of ROI today in these meetings?
Yeah, totally. ROI calculators, love them. They're great. There's often met with a bit of skepticism. So we always want to make sure that it's the customer putting their data in there and not the sales rep. That's sort of like rule number one. And align the ROI calculator as much as you can to what the company initiatives are, rather than what the ROI calculator can just spit out on its own. And I think that's a really critical one. So if you think about the CFO at that company you're trying to target, what's the number one initiative? Is it retention of their base? Is it growth of a net new product line? Pivot the ROI calculator based to that CFO's priority. Use their data, make it as real as you can. And then we always say, and cut the number in half, right? You don't believe it. Let's just take a third of it.
That's
and
right.
That would be upside.
That's right. I think it's spot on. The calculators that many of us have put together, they're helpful, they're directional, they're part of the sales, opening dialogue. But the great calculators are really those business value assessments that are deeply tied to the discovery and knowing of what the problems are we're solving. And to your point on cutting in half, it's about utilization and adoption. We don't usually get 100%. So how do we make sure it's real? So it's good feedback on that.
Yeah, and connecting to that above the line leader as much as possible, like that C-suite person, the VP level person at the company that's trying to drive change. What are the top 3 initiatives that person right now at this moment in time, like none of us have ever been through?
Yeah.
And pivot the whole business value against that. That's where we're seeing our own deals move through the fastest, the better job that we do of that. And it's really interesting because a lot of times, we're touching below the line people sometimes.
Yep.
And we have to coach them on how to reach and talk to above the line. And that ROI calculator is one tool, but also talking about strategic initiatives is really key as well.
Yeah, I'd love to get your perspective on that. We were having some fun talking about this beforehand, but we've seen this increase in leaders joining calls. So, are you being pulled into more interactions today than you were before?
I would say it is steady state for us, but that's part of just how we roll, which is we've got a fairly engaged, executive leadership team in big deals. So someone will ask me, hey, can you reach out to the CMO over here and, let them know that we're good players. I see that you're connected on LinkedIn. What can you do for us? All that.
Yeah.
That said, one of the things we find really interesting, Jim, is a buyer will tell us, hey, look, we know what you're going to do is go to our CMO and our CEO and go to your board and all of this sort of stuff. That's not how we want this buying process to look like. The buying team is, these 3 or 4 people, and this is the process, and we want you to stay within that sandbox.
Yeah.
Work with us. And I think attention, and this is something you and I were talking about, is like, well, when do you play by the rules set by the buyer when you know your competitor is going to break the rules and go over the top? And, just in transparency, we win a lot of deals because we play inside the box and the buyer said, you guys were great and you respected us. And that's the trust you need.
Yeah.
And we've lost deals because somebody's board person went over the top of us and we should have played and done that. So there's a tension there.
I think trust is everything. And I think that it sounds like coaching the buyer on the process. It'd be foolish to not engage. It's hard for these deals to get pushed through without above the line. But if they can get us there, if we can work together, I do think there's a trust on both sides. We know that this is not a great use of time if they can't get above the line leadership bought in. And we know that our competition will always be there and we'd be flat-footed if we were not. We need to make sure that we aren't helping this company if we let them not buy. But how do you develop that trust? How do you make sure that, you're not at the whim of potentially a flawed strategy?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is what we are talking about earlier, the importance of coaching. And
Yeah.
maybe now more than ever, that's like a really critical element of that. So you're not on your own, you're getting advice from somebody who's been through it through and through. Two is the other side of coaching that you just mentioned, which is coaching the buyer. And you can say, hey, look, we'll play inside your sandbox, but here's what's going to happen. The competitor's going to do X, Y, and Z moves. We've seen the playbook 100 times before. Here's how you parry each one of those moves so you're prepared ahead of time. And then arm that person with like the champion kit that they can use to take above the line to make a really compelling business case, because you want to make them part of building trust. I think is one of our sales leaders at our companies has a really interesting thing. You want to win the person first, like that person, Fred, Sally, person you're having the cold call with. So they feel like I'm going to win. And then you demonstrate that this vendor, this relationship is going to be a win for the team. And then it's a win for the company.
Yep.
If you make that first connection, things get a lot easier over time. Now, we were talking earlier too, like your CEO says, hey, I want you to look at company X from a top-down directive. That makes things tough.
Yeah.
And so it's balance.
But I like what you said, which is we know how these are going to work. You compete against similar players. We all have our competition. But coaching the buyer on, here's what's going to happen. I know the exact play. This email is going to come in. It's going to say this. It's going to say, we don't do this or this. Let's talk through that. That's silly. And I think that you're right, that once they realize they don't want to be, they don't want that either. They don't want to be caught in that situation. So how to coach them through that is brilliant. And I think that is that trust and relationship. If we both think this is a good fit for the company, how do we work together to get this pushed through?
And, one trend that we've seen loud and clear is that companies that invest in sales enablement have higher win rates. I mean, there's just tons of data on this, and like 3, 4, 6 points higher. If you can have a conversation with a CRO or a CFO, like, what would a 3-point difference in win rates be?
Yeah.
Investing in people whose whole focus is on coaching your team to be at the very best it could be. I mean, professional sports, professional athletes, name one that doesn't have a coach. You can't.
Totally.
And so, I think we're starting to see an increased shift to not only the technology that enables the coaching, but the people that enable that coaching.
Jon, back in my previous life, I remember hearing about Marketo having a technique where you're right, they just match, execs to execs, and this is commonplace today. CMOs talk to CMOs, the COO talks to COO, CFO, et cetera. Have you seen, what do people want when we do those outreaches and you get engaged? What have you found to be the most authentic? And given that right now we're in the most authentic salesmanship we've seen in a decade, what's authentic today, and what do you want to get from vendors when they ping you?
Well, yeah, total transparency, and what I want to do is learn, and what I want to talk to others about is what's working for you, like for real.
Yeah.
Like, you've had to shift all of your in-person events to digital webcasts. Have you found a platform that works? Have you found an engagement system that's really driving demand or leads? What didn't work? Yeah. And I think like there is a very strong desire when you create those connections to share, like, here's what we're doing now. This worked this week. It didn't work last week. And that creates more trust with the vendor than hearing about what they've done. So I want to hear about their journey, their pain, what's really going on for them, how they've really turned things around. That's where I think most people get the value. And then you're building, that's what we're all doing right now. I mean, my guess is, Jim, that you are probably on a call with other CEOs, if not once a week, many times per month, where you're just learning. You just want to hear, what are you guys going through? What's happening for you?
I mean, selfishly, this daily briefing, which I kicked off to share data, because it was so critical that people realize that we're seeing great sales productivity. I get the benefit of spending time with you and great, remarkable leaders. And it's funny how often I will quote things I'll learn in these morning sessions to my team all day long, saying, "Look, there's a pattern brewing, and let's share this." So yes, I think that for all of us just to learn right now and to bring it back to our teams is critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jon, I appreciate you taking time to share today, to connect. Really great to meet you, and wish you and the team the best.
Yeah, likewise. All the best to you guys at Chorus. You're doing great stuff. And Jim, it was a real pleasure.
Thanks, Jon. Cheers.